Have you ever felt back pain just on the one side but not the other? In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the reasons as to why you may be feeling it on that side and what we could do about it. Hi, I'm Alex Effer, founder of Resilient Training and Rehab, and I've helped thousands of coaches and practitioners from around the world get faster and more consistent results with their clients. Let's get into it. We're talking about lower back pain, especially on one side. There's a couple main things that we need to think about. The first thing is we probably have some degree of rotation within the pelvis. That could be a rotation within the pelvis where I'm kind of shifting my hips to one side, or it could be I'm arching my back on one side and I'm throwing the pelvis towards the other side. So let's talk a little bit about both of these, because both of these are going to appear to be very similar in that if we're talking about the right side, for example, right-sided back pain, we have a pelvis that's rotated towards the right. So again, like I said, it could be a rotation like this, or it could be my left rib is flaring and I'm pushing everything towards the right. Both of those are going to throw me to the outside of my right foot. So if I'm turning my pelvis towards the right or I'm dumping my pelvis to the right, what happens is my right foot arches and my left foot collapses. So everything is going to go on the outside part of my right foot. In order to stop that from happening, I need to be able to internally rotate the hip. If I can't internally rotate the hip, that's when I'm going to start to do other compensations so I don't fall over. One of which is hiking the hip up or arching the back. Both of those are going to take me from the outside of my foot back to the inside part of my foot. So it's just going to push me back to the middle. And although that may sound like that's okay, just because it's pushing me back so I'm not going to fall over, that could cause a lot of tension or cause a lot of overuse of certain muscles that aren't able to absorb that kind of load. And so we have a lot of weight on this right side, so I start to create this compensation like lifting my hip up, which sometimes people will say, oh, your QL is really tight, that's why you're experiencing this pain. Maybe you start to feel stuff around your erectors. Again, we've got this rotation of the pelvis and we've got this hip hike, and so now we've got all this tension around this right side. So it's not uncommon that when you see somebody bending over, touching their toes, or doing a squat, you see this rotation of the pelvis happening. You start to see one shoulder higher than the other. So in this case, if I'm shifting my hips over to the right, and I've got this right hip hike, you're probably gonna see this right shoulder drop and this left shoulder lift up. You're gonna see the rib cage turn towards the left side, again, so I can face straight ahead. So when we're trying to think about this rotation of the pelvis, we're thinking about, okay, if I've got a spine turning towards the right and I'm on the outside edge of my foot, I can't internally rotate, so I have to hike my hip up. What we need to be thinking about is, how can I internally rotate on the right to decompress the back so that other structures don't get involved? And then, how do I turn the pelvis back towards the left? And that's kind of how we need to be thinking about when it comes to programming. A lot of times people will just say, your QL is tight, let's release the QL. But maybe the QL is just holding on to you from falling over. Because in my experience, I've had clients who have come to me with back pain on the right side, for example, and they've gone to a manual therapist who's just released the muscles that are holding them from falling over. Like I said, if I'm going on the outside edge of the foot, my QL is something that's gonna push me back to the middle. I then start to release that QL, then they start to experience that discomfort again because I'm releasing the thing that is keeping them from falling over. So we need to be thinking about, how can we restore the motion of the pelvis so that the QL doesn't have to kick on as much? So the QL isn't our last defense mechanism to falling over. We aren't arching our back on the left side to push us over towards the right. So we need to think about, how do we internally rotate the right, and then how do we push ourselves back towards the left? And so these exercises are going to accomplish that. So again, if I've got right back pain, we're going to use these three exercises in order to reposition the pelvis and turn the pelvis back towards the left. So this first exercise is a cross connect with the right hip extension. What this exercise is going to do is going to create length through that right side. So again, if I've got this right hip hike, let's say, this right hip extension is going to cause this pelvis to come down, which is essentially going to lengthen these tissues already. So although I'm not really focusing on stretching the muscle, it's going to do that already. Because if I'm extending the hip and keeping the knee bent at all times, I'm going to open up the back part of the pelvis, which is going to reduce the tension being placed up here, and it's going to allow me to restore some of the internal rotation of the hip. Again, if I'm missing the internal rotation, I'm going to fall on the outside edge. I got to hike the hip up. This exercise is going to take a pelvis that is turning towards the right, improve the internal rotation, and turn it back towards the left. So what I'm thinking for this exercise is I've got my foot on top of a foam roller, and the purpose of that is I keep my hip into a little bit of hip flexion. That little bit of hip flexion is going to relax the muscles back here. If I were to have my foot on the ground, what may happen is I may just arch my back because I'm too low close to the ground. So having my foot slightly elevated makes it feel like when I push myself back that I create the tension through my glutes, and I also start to decompress the back part of the pelvis. By having my right arm reach across and my left leg marched up, that's going to turn my pelvis towards that left side even more. That's also going to open up that QL muscle. It's going to open up the muscles that are going to create that hip hike. So not only am I going to get the length through the right leg, but by reaching across, I'm going to open up the back part of the pelvis and the back part of the rib cage. So by doing this, I'm thinking about exhaling as I push the inside edge of my right foot into the wall. I'm going to inhale as I reach my right arm across my body. Now it's important that when you reach the right arm across the body, your head doesn't lift up and your middle part of your back or middle part of your spine doesn't come off the ground. I want you to maintain the pressure on the ground with the upper back as your shoulder blade wraps around the rib cage. This is going to start to untwist the body from the hip turning towards the right, back towards the left, and it's going to start to counter rotate the rib cage back towards the right because I'm opening up my upper part of my backside. The second exercise is going to be a left front foot elevated split squat with a slight rotation towards the left. So by having my foot on top of the box, that is going to unweight my left hip. So remember, if my hips are always being pushed towards the right, I have a lot of tension going through this left side. So if I could get into this position, I'm going to turn my pelvis back towards the left, which is exactly what we want. Now, if we don't have a lot of hip extension, we may be arching through our back a little bit on this. And so what I tend to do is I will actually do the right foot forward first before I do the left. I'm doing both sides, but the key thing to always keep in mind is that when I'm reaching my arms with the dumbbell or a plate, I'm going to be actually emphasizing my right arm reaching forward towards my left. So it's like I'm turning the steering wheel towards the left. And so by doing this, this is going to create this rotation of my body towards that left side. So by having my left foot on here, I'm going to have more weight starting on the back leg, but then as I come up over the left leg, I am now going to go into more hip flexion on the left, which is going to open up the back part of the pelvis, allow me to turn my pelvis towards the left. And by adding this extra reach, I'm going to create even more of that rotation towards the left. So I'm thinking about inside heel, ball of big toe and ball of pinky toe. So think about that tripod type position of my foot. I'm going to reach a little bit low. I don't want to be too high, just underneath shoulder level. I'm going to reach the right arm. I'm going to breathe in as I go down, breathe out, come up. I don't want you to push yourself back. I want you to stay over top of that left leg. And we're going to do about 2 sets of about 6 to 8 reps. So this third exercise is one of my favorite exercises in order to turn the pelvis towards the left. It's using a cable. So this can be a cable lift with a lateral lunge, putting the left foot on a little bit of an elevation. By putting the left foot on a little bit of elevation, that's gonna, again, really gonna turn me into that left hip. It's gonna decompress the left side, and by having my left foot higher, I'm gonna be putting more weight on the right side. By having the cable at the lowest position, I'm gonna start to pull the cable. That's gonna force me to push my right foot into the ground. And again, that's going to create that length through this right side, turn my hips towards the left. That is going to decompress the right side and the back of the left side. So I'm gonna start by having all my weight into this right leg, get into a little bit of a lateral lunge position. And as I pull across, I'm thinking about pushing on the inside edge of the foot. I'm trying to pronate the right foot as I go over to the left. One main thing to think about is don't hyperextend the right knee as you're pushing over. I want you to stay over top of your feet, and you should feel constant pressure going through the right side. It's like I'm pushing the ground away from me on this right side. As I'm shifting back to the left, I'm pushing the ground away from me on the left. So it's this constant stride side to side. It's almost like a power skater going side to side. I don't want you to come up and down. That's when you start to extend your knees. But I want you to stay low. That's how you keep your knees bent and your hips loaded. So this is a great way going from right to left in order to, again, decompress the right side and turn the pelvis towards the left. One of the main things with these exercises is important to understand that if you're in acute pain, you should probably get assessed by a qualified professional just to make sure you get exercise appropriate to you. But what you can also do is use these exercises when you're not in pain. You can add these in part of your program or part of your warm-up just to address some of these asymmetries within your body. So if you found this video helpful and you want to learn more about how the body moves from this perspective, don't forget to save, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.